Imagine you're shopping for a watch, not because you need one, just because you're curious. The first one you see costs $12,000. You smile, maybe even laugh. Who would spend that much on a watch? You continue browsing. A few minutes later, another catches your eye. Its price? $2,400. And suddenly, it doesn't seem so outrageous. In fact, it almost feels reasonable. Maybe even like a bargain. But something strange just happened. The second watch didn't change. Neither did your income. Neither did your needs. Only one thing changed. The first number your brain encountered. Now imagine that same invisible force following you everywhere. Into car dealerships, real estate negotiations, salary discussions, restaurant menus, investment decisions, even jury deliberations. What if one completely arbitrary number could quietly influence nearly every decision that followed? Tonight, we're going to uncover one of the most powerful invisible forces in human judgment. Most of us believe our decisions are carefully considered, that we compare the evidence, we weigh the options, and then we arrive at a conclusion. But our minds rarely begin with a blank page. They begin with a reference point, a starting place, an expectation. Sometimes we choose that starting point ourselves. More often, someone chooses it for us. The remarkable part is that starting point doesn't even have to be meaningful. It doesn't have to be accurate. It doesn't even have to make sense. It simply has to arrive first. Once it does, our minds begin making comparisons, quietly, automatically, almost impossibly difficult to notice. This invisible tendency has a name, the anchoring effect. And once you recognize it, you'll begin seeing it almost everywhere. The story begins in the early 1970s. Two psychologists working together, asking a deceptively simple question. How do people make judgments when they don't actually know the answer? Those psychologists were Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Together, they would transform our understanding of human decision-making, not by proving that people are unintelligent, but by revealing something far more surprising. Even when we're trying our best to think rationally, our minds often rely on subtle mental shortcuts, usually without our awareness. To explore this idea, they designed an experiment that has become one of the most famous in all of psychology. Participants sat before a large spinning wheel. The wheel appeared official, scientific, objective. Each person watched as it spun before stopping on a number. Some people saw 10, others saw 65. The number itself was completely random. It had absolutely nothing to do with the question they were about to answer. After the wheel stopped, participants were asked something entirely unrelated. Was the percentage of African countries in the United Nations higher or lower than the number they had just seen? Then came the real question. What do you believe the actual percentage is? Think about that for a moment. A random number, chosen by chance, with no connection whatsoever to the United Nations, no connection to geography, no connection to world politics. And yet, that meaningless number would quietly shape the answers that followed. People who had seen the smaller number consistently made lower estimates. Those who had seen the larger number consistently guessed much higher. The wheel had done something extraordinary. It hadn't changed reality, it had changed where people began their thinking. And once the mind chooses a starting point, it rarely wanders very far away. Once you begin looking for anchors, they become surprisingly difficult to ignore. Walk into almost any department store and you'll see them. A jacket, originally priced at $300, now marked down to $150. Whether that first price was ever realistic almost doesn't matter. Your brain has already begun making comparisons. Restaurants do the same thing. One extravagantly expensive entree quietly changes how every other item on the menu feels. The second most expensive dish suddenly appears reasonable. Real estate agents understand this. Show a buyer an overpriced home first, and the next property often feels like a far better value, even if it would have seemed expensive on its own. Car dealerships know it. Negotiators know it. Retailers know it. Auction houses know it. The remarkable part is that none of these situations force anyone to make a particular decision. They simply influence where the decision begins. The anchor doesn't choose for you. It quietly changes what feels normal. And because that comparison happens so quickly, we rarely notice it happening at all. In many ways, our brains don't evaluate value, they evaluate difference. Perhaps the most surprising discovery came later. Psychologists began asking a new question. What if this only affected people who lacked experience? Surely, experts would be immune. After all, an experienced real estate agent knows property values. A physician understands medical risk. A judge has sentenced hundreds of defendants. An investor studies financial markets every day. Experience should overcome anchoring. At least, that was the expectation. Again and again, the evidence suggested otherwise. Researchers found that professional real estate agents remained influenced by listing prices, even when they believed those prices were irrelevant. Judges presented with higher sentencing recommendations often imposed longer sentences, even while believing they had reached an independent decision. Doctors exposed to an early diagnostic suggestion sometimes remained subtly influenced even after receiving additional medical information. Investors, negotiators, executives, professors, none of them suddenly became irrational. They simply remained human. Anchoring doesn't exploit ignorance. It exploits something far more universal. The way every human mind begins making sense of uncertainty. When we don't immediately know the answer, our brains instinctively search for a place to begin, and the first available reference point often becomes that beginning, even when it shouldn't. If anchors influence nearly everyone, is there anything we can do about it? The answer is yes, but probably not in the way you expect. Simply knowing that anchoring exists doesn't make it disappear. Researchers have repeatedly found that awareness alone offers surprisingly little protection. Instead, the most effective strategy is remarkably practical. Delay your judgment. When you encounter an important number, don't ask yourself whether it feels reasonable. Ask a different question. What would I think if I had never seen this number at all? That small pause forces your mind to begin building its own reference point, instead of borrowing someone else's. Gather additional information. Compare multiple independent sources. Create your own estimate before hearing someone else's. Professional negotiators often prepare this way. Experienced investors do it. The best decision makers rarely rely on the very first number they encounter, because they understand something simple. The first number isn't necessarily true. It's simply first. Perhaps the most fascinating part of anchoring is that it isn't limited to numbers. The first opinion we hear can become an anchor, a first impression, a headline, a rumor, a diagnosis, a prediction. Even the first description of another person can quietly shape everything that follows. Once an anchor has been established, our minds naturally begin interpreting new information around it. Not because we're irrational, because we're trying to remain consistent. Every day, our minds are searching for starting points, most of the time without us realizing it. The question isn't whether anchors exist. The question is, who placed them there? The anchoring effect reminds us that our minds rarely begin with a blank page. Someone, or something, often writes the first number before we ever arrive. Sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes it quietly limits what we believe is possible. The next time you hear an opening offer, see a sale price, read a headline, or form a first impression, pause for just a moment. Ask yourself, is this where I want my thinking to begin? Because the greatest freedom isn't making perfect decisions. It's choosing where your thinking starts. If you've enjoyed exploring the hidden forces that quietly shape human behavior, subscribe to Hidden Influence. And until next time, keep questioning the unseen.